In the 10th century, at the height of the Islamic Golden Age, an educated and devout courtier from the glittering city of Baghdad was sent on a diplomatic mission to the cold, distant north. He was a man of science, law, and refined culture. He was not prepared for what he would find. He would come face to face with a people he described as both perfect physical specimens and the filthiest of God's creatures. He would witness their bizarre daily rituals and, most terrifyingly, their brutal, fiery ship funerals. His account is one of the most vivid, shocking, and human descriptions of the Vikings ever written. This is the true story of Ibn Fadlan. Our story begins in 921 AD in Baghdad, the heart of the Abbasid Caliphate and the undisputed center of the civilized world. A metropolis of nearly 1 million people, it was a beacon of science, philosophy, and art. Libraries held the accumulated knowledge of generations, and its markets teemed with goods from Africa to China. It was in this sophisticated world that Ahmad ibn Fadlan, a well-educated man of the court, likely a legal scholar and a devout Muslim, was chosen for a critical mission. He was to serve as the religious secretary for an embassy sent by the Caliph himself. The mission was a response to a plea from the king of the Volga Bulgars, a Turkic people living far to the north in what is now modern-day Russia. The Bulgar king had recently converted to Islam and requested that the Caliph send religious instructors to teach his people the proper tenets of the faith and, more practically, to send funds to build a fortress to defend against their enemies. Ibn Fadlan's role was to read the Caliph's letter to the Bulgar king, oversee the delivery of funds, and instruct the new converts in Islamic law. And so, on June 21, 921, a grand embassy of some 50 people set out from Baghdad on a journey that would take them across thousands of miles of perilous territory. The journey was arduous and fraught with danger. They traveled through Persia and into the lands of the Oghuz Turks, a people Ibn Fadlan described with a mixture of fascination and disgust. He found their customs strange, their hygiene lacking, and their morality questionable. They were frequently harassed, extorted for tribute, and threatened with death. This early encounter with a rugged, nomadic people was a harsh introduction to the world beyond the refined culture of Baghdad. But it was only a prelude to the far stranger encounter that awaited them. The greatest trial was the winter. Ibn Fadlan, a man of the desert, was utterly unprepared for the brutal cold of the northern steppes. He describes a cold so intense that the ground was frozen solid, rivers were ice-bound for months, and the air itself felt like a physical blow. It was in this frozen landscape, near the banks of the mighty Volga River, that his mission took an unexpected turn. Having survived the desert, the steppes, and a winter of unimaginable cold, Ibn Fadlan was at the very edge of his known world. It was here that he would encounter a group of traders who would become the subject of his most famous and enduring observations. If this story of a perilous journey into the past has captured your imagination, I invite you to consider subscribing to the Dusty Codex. Your support is what makes these deep dives into forgotten history possible. Before we meet the Rus Vikings through Ibn Fadlan's eyes, I'm curious, what do you think would have been the biggest shock? For a scholar from Baghdad, the landscape, the cold, or the people he met along the way? Let me know in the quiet comments section below. On the banks of the Volga, Ibn Fadlan encountered a group of traders who had arrived in their ships. He called them the Russia, or the Rus. These were the Scandinavian Vikings who had sailed and rode down the river systems of Eastern Europe. His first impression was one of physical awe. "I have never seen more perfect physical specimens," he wrote. Tall as date palms, blonde and ruddy. He was struck by their appearance. Both men and women were covered in intricate, dark green tattoos of trees and other figures. The men were all armed with an axe, a sword, and a long knife. They were a vision of raw, untamed power, completely alien to the refined diplomat from Baghdad. But his admiration for their physique was immediately shattered by his observations of their daily habits. "They are the filthiest of God's creatures," he declared. He described in graphic detail their morning ritual, where an entire group of men would wash their faces, hands, and hair, and blow their noses, one after another, in the same communal bowl of water. To Ibn Fadlan, coming from an Islamic culture where ritual purity and cleanliness were paramount, this practice was horrifyingly unsanitary and barbaric. His account provides a stark reminder that concepts of hygiene and propriety are deeply cultural. The most extraordinary part of Ibn Fadlan's account came when he witnessed the funeral of a great Rus chieftain. He tells us that when a chief died, his body was placed in a temporary grave for 10 days while his funeral preparations were made. His wealth was divided into 3 parts, one for his family, one for his funeral garments, and one for the immense quantities of alcohol to be drunk during the ceremony. On the day of the funeral, the chieftain's ship was drawn ashore and placed upon a great pyre of wood. A lavish pavilion was erected on the deck, and the chieftain, now dressed in rich brocades and furs, was seated on a couch inside, surrounded by his weapons and offerings. Central to the ritual was the sacrifice of a slave girl, who had volunteered to join her master in the next world. This part of the ceremony was overseen by a grim, elderly woman whom the Rus called the Angel of Death. Ibn Fadlan watches in a mixture of horror and fascination as the girl is led from tent to couple with the chieftain's men, who say to her, "Tell your master I did this only for love of him." She is given strong drink, sings songs, and prepares for her death, a willing participant in a terrifying and sacred drama. The final act was one of extreme brutality. The girl was led to the ship, where she was strangled with a rope and simultaneously stabbed between the ribs by the Angel of Death. Her body was then placed beside her master in the pavilion. Then the chieftain's closest relative, naked, walked backwards towards the ship and set it alight with a torch. The flames engulfed the vessel, the pavilion, the chieftain, and the girl, creating a massive, roaring pyre. As Ibn Fadlan watched, one of the Rus told him, "You Arabs are fools. We burn him in an instant, so that he enters paradise at once." Ibn Fadlan eventually continued his journey, but his full, original manuscript was lost to history. For centuries, his story survived only in fragments. Quoted in the works of later Arab geographers, it was not until 1923 that a more complete version was discovered in a library in Iran. His detailed, unflinching, and deeply human report is one of the most precious historical documents ever found, a rare, unbiased glimpse into the world of the Vikings, seen not through the eyes of a victim or a hero, but through the astonished eyes of a scholar, a diplomat, and a true stranger in a strange land.